between him and my other friend, Karen Campblin. She is the Environmental Justice Representative for the NAACP state. Yep. And they're also, between the two of them, they're going to update us on what's going on with Dominion and the ACP. And then after that, another good family friend of mine is going to talk about unifying and bringing unity back into Union Hill. All right, Mr. Basil Gooden. All right, that was a part of this motion for us to be out here today. Because I told folk, I said, listen, I refuse to allow a corporation come up here and cause us to have a family feud. Yes. Reason I say family feud, because everybody up here in Union Hill is related either by birth or by marriage. And we're all family for the most part. So I'm like, well, how are we going to allow this to continue to bust up our family? Right. You know, I've been on his house, on his property when I was a kid. He knows my entire family. We all grew up here together. So I refuse to allow that. And listen. And whoever is for the pipeline, that's their business. That's how I look at it at this point. That's their business. I'm not for it, and that's my business. But I'm going to let us know that we're going to agree to disagree without animosity. You know, I called Basil up the other night, and we spoke. And I'm going to do it again, Mr. Gooden. I'm going to do it in public, because in public, I offended him. You know, I called his name out in public and called him a whole bunch of stuff in public. And I had to apologize. You did so I'm doing it publicly now. That I apologize for whatever I said offensively about you.
You didn't have to. Apology accepted. And please accept my apology, because I've offended many of you with some of my positions. But again, we're here to bring the community together. And Ricky, you never offended me. I never took anything personally. I never took anything anybody said personally.
Well, we both sweated at each moment.
Oh yeah, we did. But again, what I do tell people, we're more alike. We're more together than we are separate. So, but anyway, thank you for what you're doing.
Appreciate you, man.
And I love what y'all are doing, and thank you.
And I will be at everybody's family reunion.
Yeah, absolutely. We will.
John, Karen, please.
Hey, Ricky,
yes.
You and the Basil. I want to ask y'all a question. Why y'all let Paul Wilson left?
I guess he had something to do. I had no control of whether he stayed or leave. Yeah, you said why we let him leave. I ain't got nothing to do with that man's
room. You should have let him be here and hear this.
Oh, we'll catch it at some point.
Oh, yeah.
I think somebody recorded it. We'll send it.
We'll catch it. I think my intern recorded, so I'll make sure you see it.
I did.
Folks.
Thank you, Richard, for that too generous introduction. My name is John Sokolow. I'm an attorney, I'm a writer, and most importantly, I'm an activist fighting very hard to stop the Mountain Valley Pipeline and the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Richard is right. We did have a nice and interesting meeting with Attorney General Mark Herring on Monday as part of an NAACP delegation. I would put it this way. I love this quote from Harry Truman, President Harry Truman. I think that sums it up. We didn't give him hell. We just told the truth and he thought it was hell. I'm an attorney, as I said, so one thing I know is there's a lot of hungry people here. There's some great fish, so I'm going to try not to talk too long. But if you don't know anything else about the legal situation with these pipelines, know this. These pipelines can be stopped, they must be stopped, and they will be stopped.
Yeah.
I know many of you are following this pretty closely, but here's something that you may not know. Just last night, there were 3 briefs filed with the 4th Circuit in the Atlantic Coast Pipeline case that involves the compressor station at Union Hill. It's about 200 pages of legal filings. I read most of it. I was up late last night reading it. Those are in addition to the amazing brief filed a week ago by the Southern Environmental Law Center, also on the compressor station. It is abundantly clear to me, and I think will be clear to anybody who reads these briefs, that Virginia not only ignored concerns about environmental justice and environmental racism, they ignored the law of Virginia. They ignored the law of Virginia. They did not consider what Virginia requires that you consider, which is the suitability of putting an industrial facility of this nature in this beautiful community, in a community that's predominantly African American, a historic African American community. They did not consider the oral traditions of this community, the family relationships that Richard talked about, the slave cemeteries marked and unmarked in land all across this area here. They just ignored the law. And one of the messages we brought to Attorney General Mark Herring when we met him, we asked him this: if nothing else comes out of this meeting, will you promise that you personally will read the briefs that are being filed in the Fourth Circuit this week? And he said he would. So I like to believe that people are people of good faith. Don't know what Mr. Herring is going to do. He's got his own issues going back to February. We talked to him about that and said, here's an opportunity to get on the right side of history and the right side of a racial justice issue, get on the right side of clean energy, get on the right side of climate change, and really take a stand to protect this community. Richard's point, I think, is very well taken. Dominion, by coming into this community, has ripped it apart by design. By design, they're trying to pit family against family, people against people. I think the conversation at this point, having read all of these briefs, is how are we going to be bringing people together in this community once we win. Once we win, because we will win this case, I guarantee it. I guarantee it. The Fourth Circuit has thrown out in this, and you don't see this when you read the newspapers, the Fourth Circuit has considered a series of federal permits for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and another series of federal permits for the Mountain Valley Pipeline. In every single case, the Fourth Circuit has thrown out those federal permits. And the same thing is going to happen with, same thing is going to happen with the Union Hill compressor station. And not only because it's the right thing, but because the federal agencies, the state agencies just violated the law. So here are our asks for the state of Virginia with both the pipelines. Mark Herring has the authority to advise the Department of Environmental Quality to do a stop work order on the Mountain Valley Pipeline because they're missing all of the permits that they need to construct this. They're involved in environmental degradation across the Southwest Virginia. He has the power to do it. He needs to act now. On the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, Mark Herring is not just a neutral party. Mark Herring is in court now. Imagine this. Imagine this. After the events in February, the disgraceful events in February involving our governor and involving the Attorney General, Mark Herring is being presented with a choice whether he's going to stand on the side of environmental justice or stand with Dominion and rip apart this community. He has a choice to make. We told him that he had that choice, and it'd be a good opportunity for him to do the right thing. It'd be a good opportunity. The briefs that were filed included the filing by the state NAACP, by 28 elected officials representing more than 2 million Virginians, came out last night, opposed to the construction of the compressor station. National organizations, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Dominion better look up the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. It was formed by President John F. Kennedy in June of 1963 in response to the Birmingham campaign that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was engaged in to get legal help to redress environmental and other injustices, civil rights violations across the United States. That committee, which is based in Washington, has no connection to the Union Hill case before, heard about this case and put their name in the court, a 40-page brief last night laying out the history of environmental racism in the United States, and they called what's happening in Union Hill a textbook example of environmental racism. So Dominion better read these briefs. I don't think Dominion will do anything because they care about one thing and one thing only, which is money. But Mark Herring is an elected official. He has a duty to represent the people of Virginia. He better get about the business of representing this community, and he better get about the business right now. So thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm so proud of what's happening here with this solar demonstration project. I think it's a wonderful project. It'll help bring this community together because in the end, what we all need is not just the right result legally. We need healing, and we need to do honor to this community, to its rich history. One of the briefs that was filed talked about that Union Hill deserves to be protected and it deserves to be respected. And that needs to start right now. So thank you all very much for coming, and thank you to a lawyer, from a lawyer, to listen to me drone on about this. But as Richard said, once it gets started, it's hard to pull the plug. So, thank you all. And I'll turn it over to Karen Campblin, my good friend.
Hello everyone, my name is Karen Campblin. I'm the chair for the Virginia State Conference NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. And so I just want to talk briefly first about what the meeting entailed, but I also want to talk about another pipeline project that's in the southern portion of Virginia. So the meeting that, as John alluded, with Mark Herron, Attorney General Mark Herron, was, we think, productive, and we're very optimistic that we're going to get some answers. But the way the meeting was set up, we broke it out into three major components. The first one was, we kind of gave him a background of what the Environmental and Climate Justice Program was for NAACP and the reason why we're here. The meeting started off on a very powerful note. The Vice President of the Virginia State Conference NAACP, Mr. Robert Burnett, he was also in attendance with us, and he came out and he immediately said, we're here to let you know we are in strong opposition to the Mountain Valley Pipeline, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, the compressor station in Union Hill, and the Southside Connector. And that was the direct and first message that we gave Attorney General Mark Herron. Then we also had, in addition to John Sokolow and Richard Walker that were there, we also had Kim Sutter, who is a resident that is directly impacted by the Southside Connector, and she's also with Mothers Out Front. And we gave each of these individuals an opportunity to tell the community voices what is going on and give a first-hand example of how this project is devastating lives, livelihoods, and our nature, and our natural resources. Now, the one thing that I did tell Attorney General Mark Herron is we cannot live by these platitudes that we continually get from our elected officials, right? We have been suffering from the vestiges of the systemic racial and discriminatory policies that were in place on the books centuries, decades ago. And a lot of these communities, of African American communities and low-income communities, are still suffering from those. And so when we're asking for mitigative measures, what you would normally do for an affluent community is not enough for the communities that have been disproportionately burdened for decades. I told them that we're starting from here. We need things to equalize what these communities have been going through. It is a cumulative impact that has been ignored and unaddressed, and has experienced disinvestments for decades to come. And we are at the 11th hour with these communities, and they need immediate and the utmost attention. And so I think we did a really good job telling Attorney General that. John gave you, and you're very well versed with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the Mountain Valley Pipeline, but I want to give a brief overview of the Southside Connector, also known as the Hampton Roads spur to the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Even though they're trying to say that this project has nothing to do with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and try to remove the project from the Atlantic Coast Pipe, the main line, it is a part of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. And that is another thing that we stress with Attorney General Mark Herron. It is a part of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. We had pictures, and we talked about, so this pipeline, the construction for this pipeline is pretty much complete. All they need to do is turn on the gas, and we're telling Attorney General Herron that the construction practices of this project were shoddy. There are existing homes in this community in which the chimney has separated from the home. We're noticing foundational, cracks. There is a lot of devastation that has been done to the homes, and Virginia Natural Gas has not reached out to any of the homeowners, and they have ignored all of the complaints that they have received for the damages that they received. Not only that, we also made Attorney General Herron be well aware that there was no public debate and or public hearing for the alignment change that brought the pipeline through a predominantly African American community. Georgetown, and it's comprised of several other subdivisions like Hollybrook and the like. Now, these communities are predominantly African American because of redlining. At one point in time, this is the only place African Americans were allowed to buy homes. And so we have this community that has struggled to stay established, and to have a pipeline go through them is just another check mark of the systemic and discriminatory practices that our elected officials have allowed corporate to take advantage. We also gave him a copy of the the National NAACP. If you guys haven't read this yet, it's called Fumes Across the Fence Line. And it's a report that the National NAACP wrote about some of the damages and the devastation that these fossil fuel companies that are typically placed in communities of color and low-income communities. And we stress that the number one contributing factor for siting of these polluting facilities is race. As Georgetown can clearly illustrate that to be accurate, Georgetown communities, those homes are way above market value. The only thing that was the contributing factor that made it okay for them to change the alignment without any type of public debate or public hearing is race. It was going through a predominantly African American community. So we gave Attorney General some other documents. We gave him a copy of the brief that John said he said he was gonna read. And we also gave him a report that was released by NAACP on April 1st of this year called Fossil Fuel Foolery. And it talks about the 10 top false information and misinformation that utility companies give community organizations and local elected, saying that these polluting fossil fuel factories are beneficial to the community. And so I'm hoping that Attorney General Herring will read these reports and understand exactly what we mean by when we say that the disproportionate impact should stop and should not be allowed anymore. We gave him a list of one of the big lists for the Southside Connector, right? They had submitted an application for a distribution line to go through. I'm not used to all this. To go through they had put in a permit for a distribution line to go along one of the main arterials. I think it's a military highway, and it was a distribution line. However, after careful investigation that the public had done on their own, they realized that it's a transmission pipeline, a 24-inch pipeline that's going through. So one of the main things that we asked for, of course, stop the project, but also to prevent the pipeline to transmit over anything over 200 psi. At present, they're asking for 1,250 psi for the pipelines, the pressure to go through the pipelines. Now, I want to bring that up because these pipelines are currently going through, in order to avoid public debate, they are going through an electrical easement. So right now we have a pipeline and electrical facilities co-located, which industry standards say they are not supposed to co-locate, right? Not only that, but this easement is going in directly behind existing homes. And I showed Attorney General a picture that I had taken. It was a panoramic view of the street in which we had a pipeline, a substation, and in the near distance, within the same development, an abandoned coal ash pond. One development, and we stressed that to Attorney General Herring, that because of these discriminatory land use and zoning practices that happened in the past that made it easy for them to place these polluting facilities in African American communities, we cannot continue to pile on and pile on and pile on. These communities are already overburdened. So hopefully, from that human aspect, hopefully Attorney General will reassess what he has seen both on a legal level, but hopefully on an empathetic human level as well. So, all right, I think that's it. Thank you. We gave them, I forgot this part. This is the best part. We gave them until Juneteenth. Did I say that? Juneteenth to make a response.
Put them on a time.